Welcome to our deep dive. We're tackling human nature today, which is always a fascinating topic. You've sent us some really interesting bits from Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature, and, well, I'm excited to dig in with our expert here. Greene doesn't just get philosophical, you know? He gives us this practical guide to figuring out why people act the way they do.
And that's super relevant now, right? Especially in what Greene calls the age of irrationality.
Yeah, that definitely caught my attention.
What really gets me is how tech, like all the social media and the constant news, might actually be making those primal tendencies even stronger.
Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good.
Well, think about those algorithms, right? They're designed to keep us hooked, often by playing on our envy or making us outraged. It's like we're bombarded with stuff designed to trigger those deep down irrational responses.
Makes you realize how easily we can be, well, manipulated if we're not paying attention.
Exactly.
Greene's argument is that this lack of self-awareness, it really makes us vulnerable. I mean, bad decisions, falling for toxic people, the whole works.
Oh, he uses a really powerful example to show this. The 2008 financial crash.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That wasn't just a few bad guys. It was this total system failure, driven by, you guessed it, irrational groupthink. Even the smartest people got caught up in it, proving that logic can vanish when emotions are running high.
So basically, even smart people can get swept up in the craziness.
Yeah, pretty much.
It really shows how crucial it is to understand, our emotional side.
Right.
But Greene isn't saying we should just, bury our emotions, is he?
No, not at all. It's about being more aware of them.
Yeah.
More like, okay, why am I feeling this?
That makes more sense. There's this thing he talks about, the conviction bias.
Yeah.
Basically mistaking a strong emotion for actual truth.
Uh-huh. That's a big one.
It is. It makes you realize how easily we can be swayed, even if those emotions, aren't even based in reality.
Absolutely. Like when you're so sure you're right, even when, everything's pointing the other way.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Greene says, recognizing that bias is, essential for good decision-making.
Makes sense.
And he uses Pericles, that Athenian leader, as the perfect example of someone who really balanced reason and emotion.
Pericles, he was known for being cool under pressure, right? Like a master strategist.
But exactly.
Are there specific techniques he used that, we could try in our own lives?
Well, Greene talks about avoiding what he calls high-grade irrationality.
High-grade irrationality. Yeah. Okay, that sounds a little intense.
It's those times when emotions go so crazy that you just become reactive. Like imagine the little demon taking over your brain, hijacking all the logic.
Oh, so like when road rage takes over and you do something totally out of character.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get that.
And often you don't even realize it's happening until it's too late.
Yikes.
Greene uses Anton Chekhov, the writer, and his resentment towards his dad as an example. Chekhov only really dealt with that resentment after, really digging into its root.
So therapy, figuring out the why.
Right. And it shows how important it is to understand the why behind those big emotions.
Okay, so how do we actually get a handle on all that?
Well, Greene says start by questioning those emotions. Like, why am I so angry right now? Why do I need this attention so badly? Like you're investigating your own mind.
So being our own therapist.
Kind of, yeah. And through that, digging deep, we can start to untangle ourselves from the grip of those emotions, like shining a light on those shadows.
Interesting. So instead of them controlling us, we start to use them to inform our thinking.
Exactly. Leading to, hopefully, clearer, more rational decisions.
But doesn't all this self-analysis, make us turn into robots? All logic, no feeling.
Not at all. Greene's not advocating for that. It's about finding the balance. Imagine our rational and emotional sides working together, each one making the other stronger. That's the ideal.
I like that. Working together.
Now, let's talk about a specific personality type that Greene goes into: narcissists. He says we all have some narcissistic tendencies, that craving for attention,
Oh yeah, we all love it when people agree with us, right?
For sure. But Greene focuses on what he calls the deep narcissist. Their need for attention and control, it goes way beyond healthy self-love.
Okay, so not just being a little vain.
Right.
This is something more serious.
He uses Howard Hughes, the entrepreneur, brilliant but also, troubled. Hughes' deep narcissism basically caused his downfall. He was so obsessed with control that he isolated himself. Sabotaged his own success, really.
So unchecked narcissism can be self-destructive.
It really can.
How do we spot these deep narcissists before they, cause chaos in our lives? Greene gives us some warning signs, right?
Yes. He says to watch out for a few things. A huge need to be in control, being super sensitive to any criticism, and a tendency to create drama.
Ah, the drama of queens and kings.
Exactly. Recognizing those red flags can help us protect ourselves from people who might try to use us.
Yeah.
But it also makes you think, how do we make sure our own self-love is healthy and doesn't turn into that destructive kind of narcissism?
That's a question for all of us, I think. How do we walk that line?
Greene says, look at your past behavior. How have you handled criticism? Do you always blame others when you mess up? Have you manipulated people to get your way?
Ooh, that's getting personal.
Well, those patterns, they can show if your self-image is a bit off.
So a reality check.
Right.
Okay, so being honest with ourselves about those patterns.
It's about looking for inconsistencies between how we see ourselves and how other people see us.
Interesting. So if there's a big gap, maybe time for some introspection.
Exactly. And this actually leads us to another fascinating topic.
Right.
Nonverbal communication. Greene's point is that those nonverbal cues, they can be way more revealing than what someone's actually saying.
Oh, I love this stuff. It reminds me of Milton Erickson, the psychiatrist. He had this unique approach based on reading body language. His story is amazing. He was paralyzed by polio, but he used his understanding of nonverbal cues to, get this, regain movement.
That's wild.
It is.
It really shows that deep connection between our minds and bodies.
Yeah.
But what's really useful for us is Greene's advice on how to get better at reading those signals. Pay attention to when words and body language don't match up.
Oh, that's good advice.
Like, imagine you're in a meeting and someone's saying all the right things, but their body language is screaming uncomfortable. Big red flag.
Yeah, you can't ignore that. It's like becoming a detective of human behavior.
Exactly. Greene calls it paying attention to the tells, those little hints that reveal what's really going on. And this actually ties directly into his ideas about persuasion.
Oh, persuasion. Always relevant.
He says effective persuasion isn't just about logic or arguments.
There's got to be more to it.
It's about lowering resistance, understanding the other person's emotional needs.
So appealing to their emotions.
He uses Lyndon B. Johnson as an example. Johnson was a master at figuring out people's insecurities and then, validating them, making them feel good about themselves to get their support.
So making them feel heard and understood.
Exactly. And that makes them more open to your message.
That makes sense. So deep listening is crucial here, right?
Totally. Greene says most of us suck at it.
Ouch.
Because we're too busy thinking about our own stuff.
Guilty as charged.
But deep listening, it's not just hearing the words, it's understanding the emotions behind them.
So active listening, not passive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by becoming better listeners, we become more persuasive and we build stronger relationships. So win-win.
So we've talked about self-awareness, but relationships bring a whole other level of complexity. Greene gets into some of the darker stuff, like the whole destructive nature of envy.
Right. It's not just about wanting what someone else has.
No, there's more to it.
It's that deeper resentment. It can really poison connections.
He actually does a good job of unmasking envy, saying it hides behind things like indignation or resentment.
Yeah, you might not even realize it's happening until it starts affecting how you act.
He uses this example, Mary Shelley, the one who wrote Frankenstein, and her friend Jane Williams. At first, Jane was totally into Mary's intelligence and fame, but it turned into envy. And then, things got messy. It shows how even solid friendships can be vulnerable to that kind of negativity.
Greene's point about enviers actually getting close to their target, that's really interesting.
So it's counterintuitive, right?
And they get closer to the very thing they envy, which just makes it worse.
Like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Exactly.
But he does give us some tips, for recognizing those early signs, what was it, poisonous praise, those backhanded compliments.
Oh, those are the worst.
Like they're trying to dim your light so theirs shines brighter.
Right, but Greene doesn't just leave us with warnings about envy.
Oh.
He talks about how we can actually use people's covetousness to gain influence.
Whoa, that sounds risky.
It is, but it's true. He says we're all hardwired to want what others have. He uses Coco Chanel as an example. She became a trendsetter by tapping into those hidden desires of women.
I mean, she was a fashion icon.
She knew how to create that sense of mystery around her designs, made them even more desirable.
Playing on that basic human instinct, wanting what you can't have.
Exactly. But it makes you think, what about the ethics of it all?
Yeah, where's the line between being smart and being manipulative?
It's a good question. Greene does talk about integrity, being authentic.
So don't be a jerk about it.
Right. But it definitely raises some questions. Speaking of a bigger picture, Greene really emphasizes long-term thinking. He argues that our culture, it's all about instant gratification, that it leads to, well, bad decisions.
Short-term rewards, long-term consequences.
Exactly. It's like we only see the immediate payoff, but not what might happen down the road.
He uses the South Sea bubble as a cautionary tale.
Well, that one's a classic.
All that speculation, all that greed led to a whole lot of people losing everything.
Yeah, it shows what can happen when we don't think ahead. And Greene brings up this interesting idea, moral time.
Moral time. I don't think I've heard that one before.
He suggests our sense of right and wrong, it can actually change over time. Think about how views on certain issues have evolved, right? What was totally unacceptable years ago, well, might be totally normal now.
So morality is more fluid than we think.
Exactly. It changes with time, with experience.
It makes you think, what we consider ethical today, maybe it won't be in the future.
Right. And Greene argues that this expanding our time perspective, it helps us make more ethical decisions, sustainable ones too.
So it's not just about planning for the future, it's about a mindset, a way of making better decisions now.
Absolutely. He actually encourages us to fight against that instant gratification culture, practice mindfulness, limit all those digital distractions, create space to actually think.
Hit the pause button on all the craziness.
Yeah, exactly.
So we can reconnect with what truly matters. And this mindfulness thing, it seems like it could help with navigating group dynamics too, which Greene talks about quite a bit.
He's big on the idea that groups have this powerful influence over us. Often, they push us toward conformity, toward acting irrationally.
It's like peer pressure, but on a bigger scale.
He uses the Cultural Revolution in China as an example. You see how individuals get swept up in it all, doing things they'd never do on their own.
It's like the group's energy just takes over.
Greene observes that groups create this collective energy.
That can be dangerous.
Yeah, it can be intoxicating, but dangerous. You lose yourself in the crowd, You become more easily swayed. And it's not just these big historical events either.
It happens in everyday life, too.
All the time.
Think about those times when you felt pressured to agree with everyone else, even if you, didn't really agree.
Or when the group gets so worked up that you get swept up in it, even if you know it's not right.
It happens to the best of us.
It's a reminder that groups have this hidden power over us, whether we realize it or not.
So how do we deal with that? Greene says we have to be aware of it, first of all, and then work to maintain our individuality within the group.
It's a balancing act, for sure. Belonging, but also being your own person.
He also warns against just blindly following the crowd.
Right. Think for yourself. Be willing to question the groupthink,
Even if it means going against everyone else.
Exactly.
Which can be hard, especially when everyone's, on the same page.
It takes courage.
But Greene makes a good point. That kind of independent thinking, it's crucial for personal growth and for making good judgments.
It's about having the courage to question, to see things from different angles, and then to come to your own conclusions.
This ties into what he says about authority versus power, right? He says true authority comes from trust and respect, a shared vision.
Whereas power based on, fear or manipulation, it doesn't last.
He uses Queen Elizabeth I as an example. She didn't start in a strong position, but she earned the respect of her people, guided them toward a shared goal.
It shows that real authority, it's earned, not forced.
You don't just demand respect, you have to earn it.
Exactly. And this is really important now, don't you think? With all the changes happening, traditional hierarchies being challenged, new ways of leading are emerging.
It's about collaboration, shared purpose, not just holding a fancy title.
It's about inspiring others to do something amazing.
And Greene's point is, these leadership qualities, they can be developed. You're not just born a leader, you learn to become one.
Right.
So anyone can step up. It's not just for a chosen few. Greene suggests focusing on personal growth, building competence, strengthening character, and deepening our understanding of human nature, of course.
He also talks about the importance of vision, being able to see the bigger picture and get others excited about it.
So being a good leader is also about inspiring others.
He gives the example of Xenophon, this Athenian general, had no military experience, but he ended up leading 10,000 Greek soldiers back home after they were stranded in Persia. Talk about pressure.
That's incredible. So even under those circumstances, a leader can emerge.
Exactly. And it shows that we all have the potential to lead, even if it's not in some, official way.
It could be at work, in our communities, even just being a good role model for someone.
Right. It's not limited to job titles. It's about making a positive impact wherever you are. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about aggression. It's usually seen as a bad thing, but Greene says it can actually be a powerful force.
Wait, aggression can be a good thing.
It can, but it depends on how it's used. He makes a distinction between destructive aggression, the kind that's fueled by anger or insecurity,
And the other kind.
controlled aggression. That kind can actually be channeled into positive action. It's about using that energy to overcome challenges, achieve goals, stand up for yourself.
So it's like instead of letting aggression control you, you use it to your advantage.
Exactly. He says it's not about suppressing aggression, but understanding it.
And then using it strategically.
Right. He compares it to taming a wild horse. Takes skill and control.
Okay, that's a good analogy. But what about when other people are being aggressive? Especially those who are like constantly aggressive, the ones who seem to love conflict.
Oh yeah, those types. Greene says, don't get into direct fights with them.
Why not?
It just makes things worse. Pick your battles, Know when to walk away.
Sometimes it's better to just disengage.
Exactly. But it's not about being a pushover either.
So how do we handle those situations?
He suggests looking for their vulnerabilities, the things they're trying to hide.
Like what?
Could be fear, insecurity, even a fragile ego.
So figuring out what's driving them.
By understanding their motives, you can sometimes, disarm them.
That's pretty clever, but it sounds delicate.
It is. Greene stresses staying calm.
Which is hard when someone's, being aggressive.
For sure.
Yeah.
But if you can stay rational, you prevent them from controlling your reactions.
So don't let them get to you. Easier said than done.
Greene suggests mindfulness techniques, deep breaths, meditation, even just stepping back for a minute to get some perspective.
Creating some space so you can choose how you react instead of just, reacting on autopilot.
Exactly. And speaking of challenging interactions, Greene also gets into envy, that emotion that can really mess with relationships.
Yeah, and with how we feel about ourselves.
And often comes from, feeling inadequate, comparing yourself to others and coming up short, which breeds resentment, bitterness.
He uses Mary Shelley and her friend Jane Williams as an example, right? Jane was at first attracted to Mary's success, but then it turned into envy, and she started undermining her.
It's sad, but it shows how envy can even damage strong friendships.
What I find interesting is how Greene points out that envy often wears a mask.
Yeah, you might not even see it until it's already taken over.
So how do we spot it? In ourselves or in others, Greene gives us some signs to watch for.
Right, like that fake praise. Those backhanded compliments.
Yeah.
Downplaying other people's accomplishments.
So subtle digs disguised as compliments.
Exactly.
He also says it's important to, to be honest with ourselves about our own envy.
Yeah, it's tempting to deny it.
But how do we move past it?
Greene suggests focusing on what you're good at, what you've accomplished.
So a little self-love.
Right. And be grateful for what you have. Celebrate other people's successes instead of feeling threatened by them.
So it's about shifting your perspective. Instead of seeing it as, oh, they have that and I don't. It's more like, that's great for them and I have these things to be happy about.
Exactly. It's a shift from scarcity to abundance.
Interesting.
Greene also talks about how you can actually use people's covetousness to your advantage.
Whoa, now that sounds a little sneaky.
Well, he says we all have that instinct, right? To want what others want.
Okay.
He brings up Coco Chanel again. She created this air of mystery and exclusivity around her designs, which made them even more desirable.
Smart. She understood how to use that psychology of wanting.
But of course, you have to use it ethically.
Right. We're not trying to be manipulative here.
Greene emphasizes being genuine.
So don't try to trick people. Just be passionate about what you're offering.
Exactly. And this brings us to another key theme that Greene explores, the importance of thinking long-term.
It's like we're building this toolkit for good leadership, not just leading others, but leading ourselves too.
Right. It's about recognizing that potential, that ability to lead. It's in all of us.
And it can show up in so many different ways.
Greene says focus on those core qualities, those things that make a good leader. Build your competence, strengthen your character, and of course, keep learning about human nature.
The more we grow as individuals, the better we can, inspire and guide others.
Exactly.
And it's not just about formal roles, right?
Not at all.
It's about taking initiative, making a difference no matter where you are.
Absolutely. And this idea of, leading effectively, it ties into something else.
Yeah.
Greene talks about aggression.
We're back to aggression. I thought we covered that.
Well, it's a big topic. Yeah. And he makes this point that aggression, if you understand it, if you can channel it the right way, it can be a real force for good.
Okay, I'm listening. Remind me, what's the difference between destructive aggression and, controlled aggression?
So destructive aggression, that's the kind that comes from, negative places. Anger, fear, insecurity.
The kind that just causes problems.
Right. But controlled aggression, that's different. It can be harnessed, used to overcome challenges, achieve your goals, even stand up for yourself in a healthy way.
So it's not about, suppressing those feelings. It's about directing them.
Exactly. Like taking that raw energy and using it as fuel to move forward.
It's like, I don't know, turning a negative into a positive.
He actually compares it to taming a wild horse. It takes real skill to control that power. But what about when you're on the receiving end of aggression? Especially from people who are just, chronically aggressive.
Oh yeah, those people, they always seem to want to fight.
Greene's advice is don't engage in a head-on battle with them.
But why not? Stand up to them.
Because it usually just escalates things. You have to pick your battles, Sometimes the best strategy is to just walk away.
So know when to disengage.
Right. But it's not about being passive either.
Okay, I'm confused. Disengage, but don't be passive.
It's about being strategic. Greene says, look for their vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities? What do you mean?
The things they're trying to hide. Could be fear, insecurity, even a fragile ego.
Oh, so understanding what's really driving them.
Right. Because if you can figure out what's motivating them, sometimes you can, disarm them, take away their power.
That's pretty clever. But it seems risky.
It is. It takes a lot of, awareness. And Greene really emphasizes staying calm.
Which is hard when someone's, in your face.
It is, but it's key. Don't let them control your reaction. Stay rational.
So don't take the bait.
Right. And to help with that, he suggests those mindfulness techniques again. Deep breaths. Maybe even stepping away from the situation for a minute.
Time out. I need a break.
Exactly. It's about creating that space to choose how you want to respond instead of just reacting automatically.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. More mindful, less reactive.
And, this whole idea of dealing with challenging situations applies to envy, too, which is something else Greene explores.
Envy, huh? We all experience that at some point.
It's one of those emotions that can really eat away at you, damage your relationships, make you feel bad about yourself.
It's definitely not a good feeling.
Greene says it usually comes from feeling inadequate, like you're not good enough.
That makes sense. You start comparing yourself to others and, feeling like you don't measure up.
Right. And that can lead to resentment, bitterness, even doing things you regret later.
He uses the example of Mary Shelley again, right? And her friend, Jane.
Yeah, Jane was initially drawn to Mary's success, but it turned into envy, and she ended up trying to sabotage her friend. It's sad.
It's a reminder that envy can be really destructive.
And what's tricky is it often hides. You might not even realize you're feeling it until it's already affecting you.
So how do we catch it early? Any warning signs we should look out for?
Greene says to watch for things like, that fake praise, backhanded compliments, putting down other people's accomplishments.
I know those types. Trying to make themselves look better by, dimming everyone else's light.
Right? And it's important to be honest with yourself about your own envy.
Yeah, nobody wants to admit to being envious.
But if you can acknowledge it, then you can start to deal with it.
So what's the antidote to envy?
Greene has a few suggestions. Focus on your own strengths, your accomplishments. Be grateful for what you have.
A little gratitude goes a long way.
And celebrate other people's successes. Don't see them as threats. It's about changing your perspective.
From, they have that and I don't, to good for them and I have these things to be grateful for.
Exactly. Shifting from that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset.
It's a whole different way of looking at things. But Greene also talks about, using other people's covetousness to your advantage.
Oh, yeah. That's a fascinating idea.
Sounds a little bit, manipulative.
Well, it depends how you use it. But his point is we all have that instinct, right? To want what others want.
Yeah, it's human nature.
Think of Coco Chanel again. She created that air of mystery and exclusivity around her designs, and it made them even more desirable.
She was a master at marketing.
She understood how to tap into that psychology of desire.
But using that kind of knowledge ethically, that's important.
Absolutely. Greene always emphasizes integrity. Authenticity.
You don't trick people.
Right. Be genuine about what you're offering. Let your passion shine through.
So inspire people, don't manipulate them.
Exactly. And that actually connects to one of the big themes in the laws of human nature, this idea of thinking long term.
Oh, that's something we've been talking about throughout this whole deep dive.
It's really central to Greene's message. He argues that in our culture, we're so focused on instant gratification, on short-term rewards, that we often make decisions that hurt us in the long run.
We want it all, and we want it now.
He uses a great historical example, the South Sea Bubble. This was a speculative frenzy back in the 18th century, fueled by greed and this desire to get rich quick. It ended in disaster, with a lot of people losing everything.
A classic example of, well, short-sightedness.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale that reminds us to think about the consequences, not just the immediate payoff. To be patient, to have discipline.
Not easy in today's world. Everything's so fast-paced.
Greene introduces this concept he calls moral time.
Moral time, another new one.
It suggests that our sense of right and wrong, it actually evolves over time. As we gain experience and wisdom, our views on things can change. Think about it. Your own perspective on certain issues, has it stayed exactly the same over the years?
That's a good point. My views on some things have definitely shifted. What I thought was, right or wrong back then, maybe I see it differently now.
Exactly. It's this idea that morality isn't static. It's dynamic. It changes with time.
It makes you realize the importance of being open to new perspectives, to, questioning your assumptions.
And Greene argues that this, expanding our time horizon, it helps us make better decisions. More ethical decisions, decisions that are aligned with our long-term goals and values.
It's about taking that pause, right? Looking beyond the immediate moment and considering those bigger implications.
And this long-term perspective, it's especially important when we think about the power of the group, something we've touched on quite a bit today.
The group can be a powerful influence, that's for sure.
Greene emphasizes how easily we can be swayed by the group, how we tend to conform even when it goes against our own better judgment.
Like that feeling of, everyone else is doing it, so I should too.
Exactly. He tells this really powerful story about a young man named Jianhua who got caught up in the Cultural Revolution in China. He ends up embracing the group's beliefs and behaviors, even when, deep down, he knows it's wrong.
It's scary how groupthink can take over. It's like you lose your own sense of right and wrong.
Greene makes this point about the collective energy of the group. It can be intoxicating, but also really dangerous. You can lose yourself in the crowd.
Become less of an individual.
Right. And it's not just in those, big historical moments. It happens all the time in our daily lives.
In our workplaces, with our friends, even online.
All the time. So how do we handle that?
We have to be aware of it, that's for sure.
Awareness is key.
And then consciously work to stay true to ourselves, even when there's that pressure to conform.
It's a challenge, for sure. Balancing belonging with individuality.
Greene is a big advocate for, developing that critical thinking muscle.
Oh yeah, being able to think for yourself, questioning assumptions, evaluating the evidence, coming to your own conclusions.
Not just blindly accepting what the group says.
Right. It all comes back to that core message, understanding human nature.
It's like a superpower.
It helps you navigate all the complexities of life. It gives you more control over your own choices and actions.
It's not about being perfect, right? We're all human, after all.
Exactly. It's about being aware of our tendencies, our weaknesses, and developing strategies to manage them.
So we can make better decisions, build stronger relationships, live more fulfilling lives.
That's the goal.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive into the laws of human nature. I feel like we could talk for hours about this stuff.
Me too. There's so much to unpack.
And to you, our listener, thank you for sending us those excerpts. We hope you found this conversation as insightful as we did.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas.
Keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and keep learning about the amazing complexities of, being human.